Serious, prostitutes, escorts, strippers, other kinds of sex workers. What was your first day on the job like? Terrifying. I was 21 years old and had never even stepped foot inside a strip club. I had bought a matching bra and underwear set from Marshalls along with regular heels. Big mistake. I was told to watch the dancer before me on stage, who of course was gorgeous and clearly knew what she was doing. I went up there and immediately busted my ass because of the normal sized heels. The rest of the time was just spent holding onto the pole for dear life and hoping I wouldn't get fired for being the worst dancer they'd ever witnessed. I wasn't fired and eventually got the hang of everything. But I still cringe at how awful those first initial days were. I started as a waitress in a strip club. 3 months later I tried dancing. My first time in the VIP, where I had been seeing the workflow for 3 months. So I knew what to say and where to go. But my hands were shaking. The guy even asked me if I was okay. After that first hour it was fine, but my body literally was shaking in the beginning. I didn't feel scared, though. It was a natural reaction. You must have found a nice place if your first dude was genuinely concerned if you were okay with it. Stripped briefly to pay for a semester's worth of tuition and books. On my first day, a lady shouted, "Whip out your pecker." And I couldn't help but to laugh from both nerves and the fact she said pecker. After that, the rest seemed pretty easy. I knew what it would be like going into it. I'd been working for the agency for a few months as a driver, taking the girls to their appointments, making sure they didn't get robbed or killed. My boss mentioned that he had had some interest from females wanting a male escort. I'd seen Deuce Bigalow. I figured, why the hell not? I was 18. And I cleaned up pretty nice. My first client was a woman in her late 30s. Not a supermodel, but not unattractive at all. She was in town for some auto parts convention and wanted someone to show her around. We wound up sleeping together after. I got my money and left the next morning. I did that until I moved out of state 3 years later. I did phone sex for a bit and the first day was awkward. I felt like I was in a corny PRNO from the 80s. There were also a surprisingly high number of men that asked which area I lived in and were weirdly insisting on knowing. I'm guessing BC it was over the phone, it felt more real to them. Former male stripper here. It was awesome. It was comedic, SY, and fun. Just an absolute party. The crowd had a blast. We quintuple lap danced the bachelorettes. It didn't pay much, but I wasn't really in it for the money. I would totally start another show if I can make it happen. I only had 2 brief uncomfortable moments that night. First, an old woman just grabbed my goodies. Second, another old woman shoved $1 so far between my cheeks that I didn't see it until after the show. She was making a deposit. I'm 21 and was an oil wrestler for a short time just last year and I was terrified. I had no practice or was shown anything. I made $10 in tips that night, but as it went on for the next 3 weeks, I began making more. The girls were really cliquey and at times total bitches. The men we entertained were disgusting low hygiene cowboys and rude as. Not my scene, but nothing but respect for the women who are able to have fun in that environment. Escort in a brothel. Edit. Escort is a commonly used synonym for all the other words for full service sex worker where I'm from. Making a note as there has been some confusion. Honestly, my first day was a mixed bag. The other girl I worked with was hilarious and properly took me under her wing and fed me a glass of wine before my first John to settle my nerves. I haven't drank on the job since that day, but that one drink really helped. I got tipped by one client, assaulted by another. When I was assaulted though, the other worker, the receptionist and my boss all had my back and gave him a proper telling off and barred him. This was a one-off, it hasn't happened since. I've never felt safer in any other job. And I have more control. I walked home that day with more money than I'd earn in a week in my last job. I'm long retired now, But I was 21 at the time and at a loose end. New city and no job, so decided to work at a gentleman's club as a prostitute. I'd done my research and been in for an interview, so I was feeling confident and relaxed. No one else showed up on time, so I was the only girl there on the day shift and sat chatting to the receptionists. My first client was a really good looking English Sri Lankan guy who was really sweet and equally nervous. We both couldn't believe it was the other's first time until we were both fumbling and laughing trying to put a condom on correctly. I can't remember who else I saw that day. But I do remember getting paid more than I had earned in a week working 2 jobs. I ended up working for around 7 years and really enjoyed it. Was a stripper in my late teens. First day I was nervous as some drunk dude walks up to the stage waving a dollar bill and said, "Slap your ass. I'll give you $1." Oddly enough, that made me somehow more comfortable with the whole thing. I actually enjoyed it. And wasn't half bad. Made more money, legally, from 17-20 than any other job I had until like 2 years ago. A bit intimidating. But not really much different. If anything. I had a little better of an idea of what I was doing compared to working at Starbucks. Awkward. I was 18 and naive. My first client chose me because I was new, fresh meat. He was a regular at the club. I was terrified but went along with it. He made me call him daddy, and every time he pushed into me I winced from pain. He secretly took the condom off. The manager or girl who gave me an introduction to her never warned me of clients trying to take off condoms. I couldn't tell management about him since he was a regular at the club. They also never told me there was an emergency button to leave the room if I needed to. I only learned 3 years later when a client beat me. That's when I decided it was my last day. I was a dancer in my college years. I was so nervous not because of the dancing, but because I was afraid I didn't look as good as the other girls, they wouldn't like me. It turns out they were so sweet and so diverse. One of my co-workers had 5 young kids. One of them was a PhD candidate at one of the local universities. One of them loved to bake in her spare time. Sharing small details like that about our lives made us grow together. Most of the regulars that came in were your average guys. Nothing weird or creepy. Eventually, when you got to know them enough, they would talk about things that stressed them out, like their debt or their job or my 13-year-old daughter is smoking. I'd DK what to do and you'd be more of a listener and advice giver instead of a SZUL being. First job in the industry was a sting operator for a dating website. I found out it was a scam. I was basically a bot and never got paid for talking to people. Lol, they owe me at least $120. I hope their site is exposed one day. First day was weird. I had to cater to a bunch of random guys. There was no training. Just thrown into random chats with random guys. I basically made up nonsense to keep the convo going so they could buy more credits to make the website rich while we get nothing. I was basically the person that was like, don't you like talking to me? Why won't you buy more credits then? Edit 2. Oh, I also forgot to mention. I remember feeling really weird the first day because as bots we had access to a bunch of random women's nudes. They looked like amateur porn stars or something, but I remember being like, who are these women? It just felt wrong. Former exotic dancer of 3 years. The first night was intimidating in part because the other dancers are generally hostile toward new girls. That may have just been the case at that club. I'm not sure, but also because the job itself is so heavily stigmatized that you find yourself afraid that somebody you know will see you. That faded after a few weeks though, and it was actually a really fun job. You should always be careful not to fall into the lifestyle though. Keep work and personal lives separate. 6. 9k. Dare I say. Nice double edit. 6. 9 was a 69 reference. Hence the nice. Nerve-wracking. It was professional but I was 21. It was just me and him and he had to drive me to another location. But he was super nice and realized real quick I was nervous. So he talked to me the whole way there. He even made jokes while we were switching positions. Fun guy. The world keep going in that line of work, but a friend caught chlamydia, so I was out. Dancer here. I remember being chill and excited about it. This was 20 years ago. The next few times were a little more nerve-wracking because what does an 18-year-old have to say to middle-aged men, you know? Took me a while to get comfortable. First time I posed for a photographer. I was very nervous, but he didn't allow models to smoke or drink beforehand. When he asked me to jack off in front of him, it took a bit to get hard. First time I shot a video. I was also really nervous, but it was a solo and I just relaxed after listening to the director tell me how to move around. When the other model showed up, it was just a laugh for a bit until he went down on me and I was focusing on the model and not the guy with the camera watching us and telling us what to do. In my early 20s I did some escorting. Gigolo work. I was afraid at what type of women would be willing to pay for sex. And my first client was exactly what I expected. Luckily, she didn't want me to do anything to her and just wanted to give me a blowjob while I fingered her asshole. She was amazing at it, BTW. My second client that day, however. Whoa. She was a legit 8 out of 10. She was a taller, 20-pound heavier version of Maria Menounos. You name it. She wanted to do it. She actually ended up being a repeat customer. Numerous times we would get together. And when all was said and done, was my best and most frequent client. She was extremely wealthy and just loved the idea of paying a man, other than her husband, to do the things we were doing. Male PRN talent here. First day filming a scene was scary for me. This was back in 2007 BTW. I was nervous. Shaking. Just having stage fright, I guess you could call it. SX is one thing. But videotaped with a crew and following a loose script, it added up to the point that I was honestly almost considering bailing out. My female counterpart in the scene was very nice and helped me get over it. I still chat with her today as friends. She's not in the industry anymore. iCam. My first time doing it. Something happened and my stream was shown on a lot of different places and I had almost 1,000 people show up. I was terrified going into it. But once the money started to get rolling, it felt a lot more natural. My first PRN shoot was fine. I went in. I'd paid a makeup artist, so I got that done first. I shot 2 solo scenes. Got my money and went home. Then I ate fried chicken because I'd been fasting. It was amazing. You're leaving out a lot of info here. Churches? KFC? Popeyes? Home fried? Edit. Thank you for the silver. A bit late to this, but my mother and I lived kind of ran a trap house and we always had men stopping by and looking. One day my mother told me that she had a friend that had some great weed and I should meet him. I was 20. We walked over to the friend's house and she led me to the back of the house and introduced us and promptly left. It wasn't until we were smoking and he informed me that he added a bit of crack and I was too nervous to say no. My first client was an 87-year-old who then threw $100 at me that my mother then demanded that I give her $70 for introducing us. Definitely could have gone much worse, but it was just her job to me. And I ended up making decent money. It was liberating. I was nervous at first but all smiles afterward. Being a guy, I probably had different experiences. I was awkward looking even through my early 20s. I decided to become a rent boy when I realized there was a certain subsect of older gay gentlemen who appreciated the way I had aged and carried myself. I did it for about a year or so until I met my husband. All in all, I made some money and walked away feeling better about myself. Stripper absolutely terrifying and confusing. Not the same. But I met someone on a sugar daddy site. Since I was looking to be with someone who was in more finances than I ended up a survivor of repeated sexual assault. So, not great. Edit. I have been working with Baltimore police for well over a year. And I believe he was a plant of a trafficking ring. 2 weeks ago, I got the call that the prosecutor will not be charging him. I have had a few trolls come for me, that's fine. I understand some people don't understand emotions and are rather sociopathic like that. But if I can help save another young person, it is worth it. I make TikTok videos about the dangers of online dating and have hundreds of thousands of views from them. People are dangerous, and the vulnerable do get preyed upon. And no cutesy little edgelord comment about deserving a pay and abuse will ever scare me or hurt me like my abuser did. I was scared, but my SD and I just talked to break the ice. We talked about my family, and then it turns out my SD and my mom went to high school together and my SD had a huge crush on her. After that he wouldn't stop talking about my mom. When we started having sex he started calling me my mom's name and I never saw him again. I've been a sugar baby for about a year and a half. My first arrangement taught me a lot about things I wouldn't have learned otherwise. The first night we saw each other at a hotel was extremely nerve-wracking, but I played it as calmly as possible. We'd already been chatting for about a couple weeks at that point, including going to dinners and getting to know each other, texting back and forth, etc. I felt fairly confident at that point that he wouldn't try something funny or take advantage of me. And I was right. Still, the first time having sex with someone you're processing a transaction with isn't cake, but luckily my good friend alcohol, one glass of wine, helped calm my nerves. In the end it wasn't a bad experience at all. And we ended up clicking very well. Former escort driver here. Finally a question I have a good answer for. My first night was terrifying. The girl I was driving around was held at gunpoint and the guy was demanding she give him the money he paid her back to him after services were already received by him. She managed to call the escort office with the phone in her pocket while it was going on. They called me and told me to go get her. She was pretty badass herself and was refusing to give up the $300. This was not at all what I expected for Utah County. And I was only a 150-pound Utah boy and didn't plan for this. I grabbed the only weapon I had in my car, which was a machete, and I pounded on the door. Lucky she came running out a second after. He thought she was bluffing when she told him that she had somebody waiting outside for her. The pounding on the door spooked him. She kept the money too. Stripper here. I had too much fun. Felt comfortable on stage and doing lap dances. Made $500 and was hooked forever. Late to the party. I've dabbled in real life sex work in the past. My first time was really scary for me. But the client was very kind and considerate and the experience ended up being really easy. I left the session feeling like I'd been lied to by society all this time. I didn't feel traumatized or dirty or bad. I'd had a good time and made a lot of money. I remember feeling like an idiot for not having started escorting when I was 18. My first day was more odd than probably other people's. I work in a small fetish community on Instagram. I had been there a while to begin with. Just one day I put it out there that I would make customs. It sucked as an acceptable answer. So I was an escort. I texted the brothel with a number from a friend. The next day I met them, signed my contract and went straight into a room with a client. This was crazy awkward for me. I definitely never expected to go through an escort school, but I sure as hell thought I'd get some tips or training beforehand. I sat on the bed and asked them how it goes. And learned pretty quickly. Either way I walked away with hundreds for minimal work. Far better than expected. I was so desperate and in such a bad situation financially. I basically resigned myself to allow someone to pay me for $800. I really thought it was going to be awful. I guess the cultural programming of media stereotypes and phobic narratives got to me. And then I showed up. And surprise. Surprise. Normal people pay for sex. And normal people pay to feel desired. Normal people don't pay to abuse someone. Normal people want to feel wanted. They want it to feel like a real date. I'm not saying there are no predators out there. But if you screen thoroughly, you are a hell of a lot safer than the average single woman going home with some guy she met in a bar for a one-night stand. I have always been somewhat amazed at people who can do this kind of work. And I don't mean that in a snarky, sarcastic way. I'm a man. And if I'm not sexually attracted to the person I'm with, I won't get an erection. I can't think of someone else or somehow trick my dick into standing up. It flat out doesn't happen. Cam worker here. For me it was definitely a better experience than any other first day I've had. Banker, retail worker, etc. The only downside was that I felt a lot of uncertainty about what I was supposed to be doing. And what kinds of lines, boundaries, etc. I could have. Spoiler alert, it was all up to me the whole time. Once I realized this, problems evaporated. Started with being a sugar baby. Switched into full service sex work, escorting. Now I do online camming. My first days were all really nerve-wracking. And I was surprised by just how difficult it was. A lot of people think that sex work is easy money and easy work. That can be sort of true sometimes. But it is in no way the norm. If you're thinking about trying sex work, you've got to make sure that you genuinely love and enjoy it. It can be amazing. But it can also be absolutely soul-crushing. The amount of stigma, risk, and psychological energy required to be successful can't be understated. That said, I absolutely love it. Sex work has allowed me to live comfortably and enriched my life in ways I never could have imagined. I'm able to go to school without worrying about my finances. I'm completely financially independent. I've gotten to travel all over the world. And I've met some absolutely incredible people. I feel empowered. And it's been great for making me a more well-rounded person. I dated one for a bit. She loved sex and it was good money for her. Some horrible clients she told me about, but rent money is rent money. Then she fell in love with a married client and they wanted to run away together. Empowering. It gave me confidence I never had. Taught me I wasn't being treated respectfully at work, at home, in dating world, or by my family. It was a FKN eye-opener, that's for sure. Sticky. My first day stripping was nerve-wracking. I think I made like $50. I wasn't really that good. My first time escorting wasn't as bad. I was already in the industry, so I knew what to expect. It was the easiest money I've ever made. My first time shooting PRN was exhilarating and exciting. I had a natural high for the rest of the day. Out of all of those, I definitely prefer escorting. There's a set time and a set price. Usually you don't even have to do a lot for the money. My first day on the job was fantastic. Went on a date with a pretty attractive older man. He bought me a delicious dinner. And we ended up having a passionate kiss in the parking lot. He sent me some money for our date. And the next time we hung out we had sex and I had a lot of fun and I received way more money than I was prepared to receive. I was elated. I had fun. I had orgasms. My client was nice and enjoyable to spend time with. And I made a ton of money. Best job ever.